Chapter 10. Too Good to Be True? The days wore on in much the same fashion. Work, evenings with Henry, planning the wedding with Bride magazine in my room late at night, and church on Sundays. It was around Valentine's Day that Raquel announced her engagement as well, with a ring 3 times the size of mine. Though I tried not to be jealous, it was awfully hard to ignore the sparkle on Raquel's hand. That being said, there's nothing like sharing ideas for your wedding with your best friend, and I was elated to share the experience with her and gather her advice. "We should go look at dresses," Raquel said one afternoon as we were clocking out. I shrugged. "Sure, I'm not seeing Henry tonight. He had to work late. Do you think any stores are still open?" "One way to find out." Raquel slung her purse over her shoulder and led the way to the parking lot. Deciding to just take one car to conserve gasoline, we climbed into her BMW. A few minutes later, we arrived at a shopping center. A bridal store sat prominently in the center, but it oozed the definition of expensive. Its sign alone was bigger than the other store signs put together. I bit my lip as I exited the car. Though I wouldn't be able to afford anything in here, it couldn't hurt to look. I just had to remind myself not to get excited. As we entered the store, a woman in a spotless blue suit with her hair pulled back in a bun greeted us. She clasped her hands in front of her chest and tilted her nose upward. "Welcome to Bonita. Who's getting married?" Her eyes darted from Raquel to myself, but they returned and fixed on Raquel. "Actually, we both are," Raquel smiled, "but I think her wedding will be first." She pointed to me, and a blush burned across my face as the woman turned her attention to me. "Yes, I'm getting married in 6 months," I stammered. "Well, that should give us time." She unclasped her hands and pursed her lips. "What are you looking for?" "Oh, something simple, white, maybe some lace," I said, as I ground my toe into the floor. The woman cocked her head and her eyes traveled from my feet up to my head. "You're an 8 or a 10? A 10, usually." "Right. Follow me and we'll see what we have." "Oh, this is going to be so much fun," Raquel squealed. I smiled half-heartedly and followed the woman, but I didn't really see the fun in trying on dresses I could never afford. As we traversed the sea of dresses, I glimpsed a tag and nearly laughed out loud. $4,000? I'd never be able to afford even half that much. The woman led us to the changing rooms at the back of the store. To the left was a raised platform, carpeted in pink and surrounded by 3 full-length mirrors. "Take the middle one," the lady pointed, "and I'll bring you some dresses." I obliged and waited until the first dress appeared over the top of the changing door. It was a beautiful white satin dress with a long train covered in lace and beads. Finding the tag near the zipper, I turned it over and sighed. $6,000. I almost didn't want to try it on in case I loved it, but I knew Raquel would never let me go without trying something. It fit perfectly. As I opened the door, Raquel gasped and clapped. I blushed, but continued to the raised platform. The dress was a dream come true, if not a little showy, but I forced myself to focus on the negative so that I wouldn't get excited, knowing I'd never be able to afford it. "What do you think?" the sales lady asked. "It's beautiful," I said, "but a little out of my price range. Even if I could clock a lot of overtime, I'd never afford this." The woman's lips flattened and her nose rose in the air. "I see. Well, I'll check to see what we have on the sales rack." She spun around and marched off. "I don't think she liked that," Raquel whispered, smiling. "I don't either, but I can't afford $6,000. Raquel whistled. "Yeah, that is a pretty penny, even for me. It is beautiful, though." The woman returned a few minutes later with another few dresses. I took one and returned to the dressing room. After carefully removing the first dress so as not to harm any piece of it, I then slipped the new dress on. It was much simpler, no beads, but still plenty of lace. The price was better, only $3,000, but still way out of my league. I rolled my eyes, but opened the door to show it off. "Oh, that's nice too," Raquel said as I stepped on the platform for the second time. "How's the price on that one?" the woman asked with disdain. I blushed. Better, but still more than I can afford." The woman flipped through the tags of the other dresses she had brought over. She pulled out a dress near the bottom and held it up. $1,000 is the cheapest one I have." The contempt in her voice was nearly palpable. "Well, it's very nice. They all are, but I'm afraid I can't afford it either." The woman scowled, probably feeling that we had wasted her time. So I quickly added, "Maybe Raquel should try some on now since she can afford more than I can." The woman's face brightened at that prospect. "Yes, let's do that. What are you, a 6? Raquel nodded, and I returned to the dressing room to change back into my clothes. If $1,000 was the cheapest dress, I'd either have to find a way to earn the money or find a store that sold cheaper dresses. After putting my street clothes back on and hanging up the dress, I returned to the platform area to watch Raquel try on dresses. Raquel's personality was much flashier than mine, and her dresses matched her taste. All of them had plunging necklines and long trains, and it seemed each one had more beads than the last. The final dress she tried on was off the shoulder, had a bodice bedecked in beads and a 6-foot-long train. "This is perfect," Raquel sighed. "It's one of my favorites," the woman agreed, smiling. "Shall I put it on hold for you?" "Oh, I'd love that." Raquel smiled back. "But do you have a temporary hold? I'd like my mother to see it before I decide to buy it." "Of course. We can hold it for 7 days, but then we'll have to put it back on the floor." "That's fine." Raquel winked at me and returned to the dressing room to change. Afterwards, we followed the woman to the front, where Raquel filled out some paperwork. "Are you really going to buy that dress?" I whispered, as we pushed open the door of the shop and walked into the parking lot. "Doubtful," Raquel said, knitting her eyebrows together. "That dress was $10,000. That's even out of my league." My jaw dropped. "But you asked her to hold it." She waved her hand in the air. "Of course I did. The salespeople are always nicer if they think you'll come back. I didn't give accurate information, though." Shaking my head, I climbed into Raquel's car. I didn't think I'd ever understand rich people. Raquel slid into her seat and tapped her fingers on the steering wheel. Her brow furrowed and she twitched her lips to one side. Then she snapped her fingers, her eyes sparkling. "Aha! I've got it. Do you feel up to going to one more place?" I shrugged. "As long as it has dresses under $1,000, please." "Yeah, I think this place will be perfect. I can't believe I didn't think of it first." She pointed the car north, and 15 minutes later we pulled into another shopping center. This one was smaller and much older. I scanned the store names, but nothing appeared very bride-like. "Where is it?" "There." Raquel pointed to a small shop at the very end of the strip mall. The sign was so tiny that I couldn't even read it from where we were. Raquel parked the car, and we walked up to the door. "Les Bride" was stenciled in white lettering across the glass door. Raising an eyebrow, I swallowed my apprehension and followed Raquel into the shop. A short, plump woman greeted us as a tiny bell tinkled our arrival. She wasn't dressed in a suit, but an old blue and white dress. However, she exuded an air of friendliness. "Welcome to Les Bride. How can I help the two of you today?" The knot of apprehension fizzled as the woman spoke. The woman looked like an older version of Mrs. Butterworth, though with gray hair and the name of Helen on her badge. "I'm getting married in 6 months," I said. "I need something white and affordable." Helen smiled. "I have just the thing. Come with me." She moseyed toward the back, and we followed her. Helen flicked through a few racks, clicking her tongue and grabbing a few dresses as she went. "Here we are, dearie. Try these on." She folded the bundle over my arm, and I stepped into the small dressing room and hung the dresses up on the supplied hook. I inspected the first dress, but with its overzealous beading pattern, it didn't fit my style. Moving it to the side, I gasped as my eyes landed on the second dress. It was simple but elegant. Lace covered the bodice and part of the back. The satin rippled like a sea of milk. I slid the dress on before even looking for a tag and sighed. My hands ran down the sides. It was a perfect fit. The white offset my darker skin, making me appear to glow. I twirled in front of the full-length mirror in the room, enjoying the vision from all sides. I opened the door and smiled as Raquel gasped. "Right?" I asked. "I think it's perfect." "I agree. You look like an angel." The woman appeared and pulled a pencil from somewhere in her gray hair. "Ah, yes, I knew this would be lovely. It is absolutely perfect on you, my dear." I bit my lip, hoping it was affordable. "Can I ask how much?" Butterflies fluttered in my stomach as I waited for the woman's answer. "It's on sale this week for $300. My heart fluttered. It was expensive, but not unaffordable. "I'll take it." I turned back to the mirror and beamed at my reflection. This was really happening. After paying the bill, I carried the new dress, wrapped in a beautiful gold lame box with a white bow, out to Raquel's car. Now I just have to make sure Henry doesn't find it and I don't gain a ton of weight. "I'll make sure of the latter, but the former is up to you." Raquel smiled. A few weeks later, Henry and I met up to taste cakes for the wedding. "Are you sure about this place?" I asked, raising my eyebrows at the small brick building that seemed out of place amidst the taller, newer buildings filling the rest of the block. He smiled. "Don't worry, she's a client of mine. I know it doesn't look like much, but she's the best baker around." He opened the front door and we stepped inside the little shop. Just 3 small silver tables with 2 chairs each sat in the small room. A glass cabinet housed a variety of tasty-looking treats. I had to admit, the shop inside did look much better than the outside. A bell above the door announced our entrance, and a petite blonde woman emerged from a door at the back, wiping her hands on her flour-covered apron. A stray smudge covered her right cheek. "Henry!" She smiled and her eyes lit up. "It's not Thursday. What brings you here today?"
"Hi, Cassie. This is my fiancée, Sandra. I told her you were the best baker around, and I'm hoping you have some cakes we can taste today. I'd love to have you do the cake for our wedding." She clapped her hands together and swayed back and forth on her feet. "I'd love to do that. I'm so happy for you." She turned her attention to me. "You've got a good man here. He's one of the best." I gazed at Henry and smiled back. "I think so too." "Okay, have a seat and I'll bring you some cakes to taste." She turned and disappeared into the back again, and we chose the table nearest the small storefront window. "She seems to know you well." I tried not to sound as jealous as I felt, but images of Peter and Sheila flashed in my mind. Henry's eyes twinkled. "Don't be jealous. I helped her write a great insurance policy when everyone else was trying to get her to close shop so they could take over her lot. That's why she likes me. Plus, I come nearly every Thursday for her fruit tarts. They are amazing." I wasn't jealous. I wrinkled my brow at him, surprised that he could read me so well. Just curious. Cassie appeared a moment later with 4 small white plates. Each held a different slice of cake.
We have classic white cake with a lemon filling, classic chocolate cake with a strawberry filling, a German chocolate cake, and a marble cake with raspberry filling. She handed each of us a fork. I'll let you taste, and I'll be back in a moment. I picked up the dainty silver fork and eyed the tasty desserts. Which one shall we start with?
Whichever one you like. I'll let you decide because I'll probably love them all.
I think the white cake first. I pushed the fork through the soft cake and brought the bite to my mouth. The tart lemon flavor lit up my taste buds. That's good. Henry took a bite and smiled back.
Pretty good, and I'm not even much of a lemon fan.
After a drink of water to clear the taste, I decided on the marble cake next, which was even more delicious. Then the chocolate cake, simply to die for. Finally, I took a bite of the German chocolate cake. Though delicious, it didn't scream wedding cake fare to me. Okay, so which do you like? Please say chocolate. He twisted his lips and narrowed his eyes in thought.
I think I like the German chocolate cake the best.
I wrinkled my nose and blinked. Are you sure? I mean, it is delicious, but don't you think it's kind of odd for a wedding cake?
I like being different, he said. Why? Which one is your favorite?
The chocolate one, but really they were all good. I thought for a moment. I'll tell you what. You can have the German chocolate cake, but you have to give me something in return. He tilted his head back, one eyebrow rising on his forehead.
Like what?
I tapped a finger to my lips. What might be something he would fight me on? An idea popped in my mind, and I smiled. I get to choose the wedding colors. Henry cocked his head. I could almost see wheels turning in his mind, as if trying to decide if this was a good choice or not.
Okay, deal.
Shake on it, I demanded, thrusting out my hand. He grasped it and pumped twice.
Cassie, we've decided.
Cassie entered the small room carrying a notepad and pen. Okay, what's it going to be?
We're going to do the German chocolate cake, Henry said as he stood up and crossed to the counter. Her eyes widened slightly. Really? She turned her eyes to me. You agree? I joined Henry at the counter. I traded cake for wedding colors. Cassie nodded knowingly. Ah, smart girl. Why do I get the feeling I just got played?
Henry glanced from Cassie to me and back again. Oh, I'm sure it will be fine. Cassie threw a conspiratorial wink at me. Now, do you know how many people you need to feed? Henry's brow furrowed.
We haven't really discussed that yet. Maybe 50?
I scratched my head as I ran a brief mental tally of my friends and family. I'd have to sit down and make an actual list, but I probably have close to 50 myself. Henry's head snapped back in surprise.
Really? Okay, well then I guess we better make it 100 servings.
Cassie's pencil scribbled on the notepad. And do we have a date picked out yet? Yes, September 14th at 2 p.m., I said. Okay, I'll log this in, and if I have any more questions, I'll contact you. Will that work?
That's perfect, Cassie, and thank you, Henry said.
No, thank you for the business, she replied. We exited the little shop and returned to his car. Thanks for bringing me here. She's amazing, I said, buckling my seatbelt. We'll have to come back to try her other desserts.
I already have.
He laughed as he started the car.
Okay, where to next?
Henry put the car in drive and headed out of the parking lot. Let's go look at a tux for you.
Uh-oh, what is that mischievous look about?
I smiled but said nothing. A few minutes later, we pulled into a tuxedo rental shop, the Penguin Shop. Henry opened my car door, as usual, and took my hand as we walked in. A shorter man with a mustache that covered most of his face greeted us.
What can I do for you today?
We need to look at a tux for him, I said, squeezing Henry's hand.
Okay, come with me.
The man turned and waddled like a penguin towards the back, where 3 mirrors were set up for viewing. I wasn't sure if he just suited the shop or if the shop had rubbed off on him. A small desk sat to the right of the mirrors. The man whipped out a measuring tape, seemingly from thin air, and began taking Henry's measurements.
Okay, yes, that's perfect," he mumbled as he wrote numbers down on a little white pad.
Henry raised his eyebrows at me, and I smiled in return.
"Wait here, and I'll be right back."
The man disappeared into a side room and returned with a sharp black tux.
"Let's make sure this fits."
He slipped the jacket on. It was a perfect fit. "It's perfect," I sighed, and my pulse quickened at the sight of Henry in the suit jacket. There was something about a man in a suit.
"So what else do you need? Vest? Tie? Cummerbund?"
"No cummerbund," I said, "but definitely vest and tie. Do you have a color chart?" The man nodded and produced a white board with color swatches lined 4 across and 4 down. The colors ranged from deep purples and blues to bright reds and oranges. I touched the color swatches and pursed my lips. Sneaking a glance at Henry, I smiled. "I like this color for the groomsmen." I pointed at a dark blue. "And this one for Henry." Henry leaned over my shoulder. "Purple?" he asked. "Magenta," I smiled.
Why can't I wear the blue?"
"Because you got German chocolate cake," I teased, "and I got to pick the colors. Besides, the magenta will look great on you." I held the board up to his face. "Wouldn't you agree?" The salesman nodded. Henry pleaded with his eyes, but I remained resolute. Finally, a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth.
"Okay, you win."
As the planning continued, invitations were ordered, the caterer and photographer were hired, and of course, the pastor of our church was asked to officiate. Summer burned through Mesquite, and the school year ended. Children of all ages ran around the apartment complex and splashed in the pool. Though the sight and sounds of children still rubbed the wound, it was less. Planning the wedding kept my mind off of the past, and I convinced myself that I was healing. That once I got married, the dreams would end and the guilt would go away. That if I could just make it to September, the past could be forgotten. The scorching heat faded into the beginning of muggy fall. The leaves on the few trees turned brown and began their descent from the limbs. Children returned to school and quiet resumed during the day at the apartment complex. I sat at my small kitchen table, addressing invitations and enjoying the blissful silence on a day off. A stack of white envelopes lay on one side of the table and a stack of invitations on the other. I stuffed the invitation in the envelope and licked it, but as I pressed the seal down, a sound reached my ears and froze my heart. I paused, hoping it would go away. Sucking in a breath, I closed my eyes and listened. "Mama? Mama, why?" The voice was faint, but it was there. I squeezed my eyes tighter, willing the sound to disappear. I hadn't been visited by the baby recently, and I had hoped it would stay that way. I had almost convinced myself that I had miscarried instead of what I had actually done. "Mama?" The voice was closer this time, and the soft pitter-patter of tiny feet hitting the floor joined the voice. "Oh, please." I clenched my hands at my side. "Please go away." "Mama, why didn't you want me?" The words broke my heart and my shoulders heaved. The lies and the walls I had built so carefully began to crumble, and I began to shake. Then a tug came at my pant leg, and I couldn't keep my eyes closed. My eyes snapped open. A toddler, clad in blue overalls and a red shirt, stood beside me. His chubby hand tugged again on my pants, and his wide brown eyes spoke sadness. "Why did you let them take me, Mama?" His mouth turned down as a solitary tear spilled out of his eye and rolled slowly down his cheek. I longed to touch his soft brown curls and breathe his scent, but I glued my hands to my thighs. If I could just get through this, maybe they would stop. I had thought once that maybe I could live with the visions, but the child seemed to grow every time. I was getting to see what my son would have been, and it was breaking my heart every time. "You're not real," I whispered, but it didn't ease the ache in my heart. "I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it back. I'm trying to do it right this time." "But what about me?" he asked. I didn't know. My vision blurred with tears. Unchecked, they tumbled down my cheeks, one after the other. I didn't know. I thought I couldn't handle it. I was selfish. I'm so sorry. Through my blurry vision, I saw the boy hang his head and his shoulders slump. The vice on my heart squeezed ever tighter. Closing my eyes and wrapping my arms around my chest, I let the sobs take control. I don't know how long I cried, but when I opened my eyes, the boy was gone. Isaac. The name blazed in my head. Is that what I would have called him? Or is that what God named him when he got to heaven? I hoped he was in heaven. I'd never had the courage to ask Henry or anyone else because I was too afraid of the answer. But in my reading, I had convinced myself that all babies went to heaven because Jesus found them so precious, and it had helped. But these visions made me ever more unsure about lying to Henry. I got up from the table and wandered into the bedroom. I hadn't had a drink in a long time, but my nerves were on edge. I needed the calming sensation. The nightstand was empty. I had never replaced the bottle. Dropping to my knees, I peered under the bed. One lone bottle remained. When I had retrieved it, I held it up to the light. There was only a little bit of liquid in the bottom. Hoping it would be enough, I screwed off the lid and downed the fire. As I sat in the last premarital counseling session with Henry later that evening, I wanted to tell him what I had done, but fear convinced me to keep my mouth shut. My finger ran up and down the seam of the leather couch as the events of the afternoon paraded through my mind again. The drink had helped a little, enough that I had returned to the kitchen and finished the envelopes, but not without turning on music first and situating my chair so that my back was to the wall. "What do you think, Sandra?" I whipped my head up at the sound of my name. "I'm sorry, what?" "I was asking you about joint accounts. Do you plan on combining your accounts when you get married?" the pastor repeated. Sure, I guess. I mean, why wouldn't we?" I stammered. Henry shot me a concerned look, and I plastered a smile on to reassure him. "Okay, good," the pastor said. "I think it's a good idea. If you are truly going to join together, then it ought to be with everything." "Well," he glanced from one to the other. "Unless there's something else, that's all I have." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Henry shift in his chair and cough into his hand. "No, I think we're good. Right, Sandra?" My head nodded. "Yep, feeling good, ready to be married." The pastor narrowed his eyes at the forced statements, but said nothing. He rose from his chair and held out his hand. "All right, I'll see you in 2 weeks for the ceremony then." We both shook the proffered outstretched hand and then left the office. As soon as the door clicked behind us, Henry whirled on me. "What's going on? You seemed really out of it in there." I sighed. "It was just a long day is all. I'm sorry. I am excited to be marrying you." He stared at me as if deciding if that was all, and then nodded and continued walking. I couldn't help but think that he was hiding his own secret.